all so much for joining us today. My name is Amanda Garcia, and I am the program director for our digital design, public relations, and digital media marketing programs here at Tulane SOPA. This is my contact information in case you want to reach out for any questions that you might have for follow-up or further information on our programs. We are so delighted to have Katie Stern and Ross Turner here with us today. Katie is a former student of ours in the digital design program. She just graduated, and we're so thrilled that she's back today, showing off some of her skills in ProCreate, as well as Professor Ross Turner. He's a faculty member of ours, and he really teaches in our fundamental classes, as well as our fine art fundamentals, design fundamentals, all the things. He's awesome. So we're so happy that they're here today. Katie is going to be running the demonstration, and then myself, Ross, and Professor Rebecca Carr, who's on again today, familiar face if you've been with us on previous of these Lanyap training sessions. And so we're all going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions as we're moving through, best thing to do is drop those in the chat. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, kind of along the bottom here, the bottom row, you will see a chat function and you can ask questions in there. It's a good idea to probably mute your mics as we kind of go through this, just to kind of cut back on background noise. And then if we start to see a ton of common questions coming up in the chat, then we will ask Katie to kind of time out for a moment and address those questions. Otherwise, one of the three of us other faculty on the call will address the questions directly to you in the chat. Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. We have a couple of examples to show you really what is the purpose of ProCreate and what can you do. So this poster was done by student Lauren DeBott last year, won a ton of awards this year. We're so proud of her. And this was a really fun take on the Metairie Muffalata Festival in New Orleans, if you're familiar. So she did this really fun illustration of the muffalata stacked in ProCreate, as well as hand lettering within the poster. And so this is just a really, really fun representation of combining type and image. And this was all done in ProCreate and then brought into Adobe Illustrator and finished out there. And this is a spread done by another student, Kathy Hume, and she created the lettering and the actual illustrations within ProCreate and then brought the entire layout into Adobe InDesign. So ProCreate is a tool that will allow you to create illustrations, typography, etc. And then we use that within our program as a quick and accurate method to create those assets that are then brought into Adobe Illustrator or InDesign to complete the entire composition. And then this beautiful piece of packaging was done by Katie, who is going to be doing the training session today. So this is actually competing at the National Advertising Competition. And so we're so proud of Katie. And this is her concept for Dove Kids and her Dove Kids campaign. And the illustrations were done in ProCreate. And then once again, bringing those into Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop to kind of create these real-to-life bottle renderings as well. So that's just a quick overview of what some of our students have done in ProCreate and how you can use it. So just a quick reminder, if you go to our website, you can see the additional Lanyaps we have coming up. We also have a poster that we've been promoting at some previous ones that you can download for free by artist James Victori. And then if you have attended the previous ones and need to download those reference files, they're always here under downloads. Okay, great. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Katie. And yes, so Rebecca put a note in the chat. So that is the chat box that you can feel free to use at any time. And we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name's Katie, again. So for this demonstration, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share my screen so you can all see my iPad while I'm using it. I'm using my Apple Pencil. If you don't have an Apple Pencil, you can use your finger or a different stylus, whatever works for you. But while I'm getting this loaded, I'm just going to give you an opportunity to open up ProCreate if you have not done so. Okay, I'm just gonna give you one more minute to get to this screen. So this should be what you see right when you open ProCreate. If you've never used it before, you might see some artwork that's automatically downloaded for you. But what we're gonna do today is we're gonna start with a brand new file. So how you get to a new file is you're gonna hit this plus button on the right. You're gonna come up with a bunch of options of sizes you want for today. We're just gonna do screen size. So go ahead and click on that, and it'll take you to a white canvas. During this, I might be zooming a little bit, pinching, so you can use the same pinch motion that you use to zoom in on your iPad or iPhone to zoom out and zoom in on the canvas if you want to get closer to something or further away. So the very first thing, or also yours, I should also say this, I prefer mine to be in light mode. Yours might look really like a dark interface. If you want to change that, you can go over to settings next to gallery on the left, and then preferences, and then light interface if that's something that you want. If not, totally fine. Go ahead and stick with the dark. But if you're wondering why mine looks different, that's the only reason. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the brushes. So this is mostly what ProCreate is for drawing and painting. So if you click the paintbrush on the left, you'll see that a bunch of different brushes will come up. So you got different categories. I've got some other categories of things that I downloaded. So if you see something on mine that's not on yours, don't worry. And you can see the different types of brushes. So you have drawing, calligraphy, artistic, airbrushing. So just take a minute to look through the different categories and look at the different brushes. Different brushes have different characteristics. So some brushes might change with the amount of pressure that you push on. Some brushes might change it when you start, it might be really thin, and when you keep going, it might get bigger. Some brushes don't change at all, whether you put a ton of pressure or no pressure at all. So we're gonna start, I'm gonna go over to calligraphy, my calligraphy category, and I'm gonna click the chalk brush to start. And just take a minute and draw around on your page and see how that feels. If you go harder, see how it gets a little darker, and if you go light, see how it gets really thin. So just take a minute now to go try out some other brushes, look at some different categories, maybe if you haven't done that, and just start painting a little bit on your canvas to get a feel of kind of what some of the different brushes feel like and the different ways that they can move. So if you look back at my screen, you'll notice that you can actually change the sizes of the brushes over here. So this panel over here gives us two sliders. The top slider is going to be size. So if you touch that slider and slide it, it'll give you a different percentage and you can get a preview of how big the brush is going to be. So if it's on 8%, it's going to be small. And if it's on 80%, it's going to be big. So that you can change throughout your drawing. This panel or this slider underneath is your opacity. So this is how thick or thin the brush is going to be. So try knocking your opacity down to 30% and drawing a line, and then try keeping it down at that percent and drawing another line over it. You'll see that when the two brushes mix together, it actually gets a little darker when they overlap. All right, so now that you've mastered the brush tool, we're gonna go over to the smudge tool. The smudge tool is right next to the brush and it looks like a little pointing finger. If you click the smudge tool, you can notice that if you actually click it, it'll light blue, and then if you click it again, you'll get the same options as you did with the brush tool. So go ahead and choose any one that looks good to you, and try just moving that around on the stuff you've already drawn and see what happens. Again, you can change your opacity and your size. If you don't want it to smudge a lot, you can go down to a lower opacity. You want to do so this is basically for blending. So if you're gonna do anything that you want to look more like a painting and less digital, this is a good tool for doing that. If you like blending, it's a good tool. So try looking at a few different smudge brushes. So try doing it with maybe a sharp brush or more artistic brush, like a watercolor, and seeing how that makes a different effect. This is one of those tools that I actually don't use a lot because my stuff is not very artistic looking. It's not very painterly, but some people use all the time. So it really is kind of personal preference. Now we're gonna go on to the eraser tool. The eraser tool, if you look up, is right next to the smudge tool, this one here. And if you click it, the same thing happens. It'll turn blue, you click it again, and you get the same options. So this is just anything that you draw is gonna erase. You can also do the same things with opacity and size that you did with the smudge and the brush tool to erase part of your drawing. You can also use a different brush and it will erase it in that brush texture and characteristics. So if you want to erase an entire page, you're actually going to you can use that, or you can go over to your layers panel. So the layers panel is over here. So go ahead and tap that and bring up your layers. So if you have taken a class before, or if you've done Photoshop or used Illustrator, you might know what layers are already. For those of you who don't know what layers are, it's basically like a pane of glass that you're painting on. So if you click the plus button up here to add a new layer, you're basically adding a new pane of glass. And if I painted on this one with my brush tool, I can look back in the layers and see that it's on a completely different layer. You can press these check marks to turn them off or on. They're there, there's just hiding them or not hiding them. And you can see that they're kind of independent. You can also, like you would a pane of glass, you can swap them so one of them's on top of the other. The way that you do that is you click one and hold it down a little bit until it gets a shadow underneath it, like that. And then you can drag it and put it right above, and you can see that it'll swap. It's kind of hard to tell because mine is all black and white right now, but if you were doing different colors and you had different layers, you'd be able to tell really easily when one is on top of the other. And layers can be really helpful for if you're doing maybe a sketch and then you want to draw on top of it and then eventually turn off the sketch. So there's lots of different ways you can do it. I like to do, when I change colors, I even change layers just in case I want to change something. Or if you have a different element that you want to kind of move around later, it's nice to do it on its own layer. And if you use the erase tool on this layer, it's only going to erase, let me choose it bigger. If you erase on this layer, it's only going to erase what's on the layer that you're selected. And same with drawing. If you choose a layer and you draw on it, it's only going to draw on that layer that you've selected. If you want to clear a layer or delete a layer, what you can do is you can swipe this way. So swipe to the left, and you're going to get a little menu of options. Duplicate would make a copy of that same layer. Lock would mean that you can't draw on it anymore. And delete is what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna hit delete, and that's gonna get totally rid of that layer. If you wanna start over from the beginning, you can delete this one. It'll say clear instead, and it'll just clear away what you've done. So go ahead and use your layers to clear off the layers that you've made so you're back to a brand new canvas. Okay, the next thing we're gonna talk about is color. So color is this little circle in the side, in the corner, in the right corner. Mine is black, yours might be a different color. So if you tap that, you're gonna get to your color. Mine looks like this, yours might look like this. If you click these different buttons at the bottom, it's gonna take you to a different way of finding color. So if you're on disk, you can use this to change the saturation and the lightness, and you can use the outer slider to change the hue. If you're on classic, you're gonna use this slider right here to change the hue, and then you can isolate either saturation or lightness, or you can just move it around in the actual panel. This is the one that they have in Photoshop, so I like to use this one because I'm most comfortable with it, but it's really whatever you want to choose. If you love a color and you want to save it, you can choose that color and then click, see down here where it has a palette, you can click any empty gray spot and it will save that color so you can use it later. So try choosing a different color and try drawing some lines with different colors. Maybe you want to use some different brushes, but just play around for a minute.
Katie, what brush is this that you're on right now? I haven't seen this one.
Oh, I'm on, it's called Stylus.
Good luck.
It's in inking.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever used a brush either. I just grabbed a random one that looked nice.
Yeah, I like it.
So now when you have different colors on the page, you can kind of see how you might use your smudge tool as something to blend colors. So you can try that. See, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can get a little closer, but you can see that you can use it to actually blend colors. Maybe I wouldn't use this brush. Again, I don't really use smudge tool a lot. But you can see from like if you ever use watercolors or other paints, you can see how you might use that to make a gradient. Oh, and I just used the undo tool. I didn't even say what that is. So if you make a mistake, do not worry. Procreate has unlimited undos. So how you get to undos is right over here where you had your brush size and opacity. Underneath that, you get a backwards arrow and a frontward arrow. The backwards arrow means undo and the frontwards arrow means redo. So, but it can get a little tricky. So say I drew, let's say a blue line like that. And I said, actually, I don't want that. And I hit the undo button. And I said, you know what, actually, I do want that again. And I hit the redo. I get it back. But if I hit undo and then draw something else, my redo button, you can see it's grayed out now. I can't redo that because I've already edited it. Something, if you're also having problems drawing, this is kind of a troubleshooting thing, but if at any point you realize that you're trying to draw and nothing is happening, there's probably one of three things that's happened. The first is that you're on a white canvas and you chose white as your color. That might be one of the problems. Another one is if you hit undo a bunch of times, sometimes if you accidentally click a little bit above undo and you click right here, it'll actually move your opacity to 1%. So when you draw, nothing will come up. So if you're ever having trouble drawing and nothing's coming up, double check that your opacity is not at 0. The other problem might be that your stylus or Apple Pencil died and that you have to charge it. So once you've got something on your page that you like or don't like, it doesn't really matter. It's just for the exercise. We're not really going to do anything with it. You're going to go over to this tool that has a pointer on it. This is your move tool, your move and transform tool. So if you go ahead and click that arrow, you'll see a little box of marching ants around your drawing. So basically anything in your layer is going to be selected in that box. So that means that that's the selection. And there's a couple things you can do with this. If you take your pen or your finger and you can actually move it around the page. So anything on that layer is going to move around the page. Now this can be a problem in one way. If you move your drawing to the side, you can still pull it back on, but if you move it to the side and then click your move tool again, and then try and move it back onto the page, it's actually going to be cropped. So anything that goes off the page gets deleted. But luckily we have our undo button, so if that happens, you can just bring it back on. But if you're used to using Photoshop or Illustrator where you can kind of put things to the side and then bring them on later, this is different. This is actually going to get rid of that. There's no kind of extra storage space off of your canvas. The other thing you can do with the move tool is you can transform your shape by making it smaller, bigger, thinner, wider, etc. So there's a couple different things. So if you have, let's turn magnetics off. So if your magnetics is blue, click it until it's black. Okay, so I want you to go to uniform here. Uniform, if you try dragging any of the blue square, any of the blue dots, it will make it exactly the same proportions, but in different sizes. So you can click any of them to try making it really small. If you see this little green circle, you should have a green circle above your blue circle. If you don't see it, you need to drag your artwork down a little bit. And click that green circle and try dragging it, and you'll see that your artwork will rotate. So now I'm going to make mine big again, and I'm going to click over next to uniform. Now we're going to go to freeform. So freeform, unless you have magnetics clicked on, but we turn that off, freeform is going to, when you move your arrows, it's going to squish it and pull it so you can make it wider or thinner, and it doesn't pay mind proportions. But as soon as you put on magnetics, it's going to keep these the same, but the minute that you use the corner, it's going to keep it the same proportions. So if you're thinking that you want to do some things where you make it bigger and some things where you make it thinner or wider, keep it on freeforms and turn on magnetics. The other thing that magnetics says, which is kind of cool, is if you use your green circle and you rotate, it'll snap it to a 15-degree rotation. So if you want to rotate something exactly 90 degrees, turn on your magnetics and it'll make it really easy for you to do that. Something else you can do is if you want to change the color of something on, so let's get rid of this layer that we've made by swiping left and clicking clear. Now we have a new canvas. Now try drawing a line or any kind of shape in a color. And once you've done that, I want you to click your color button up at the top. So it's blue. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna choose yellow. And then I'm gonna get off of that color. So you can click the circle again, you can click anywhere in the document, so it goes away. This circle actually gets kind of like, it's like a color paint bucket. So what you can do is you can actually click and drag the circle And you can see it turns into that, and then you can fill anything you want. So you can see it filled around the shape. You can also, if I hit undo, drag it onto the shape, and it'll fill the shape with that new color. It also works for brushes that don't necessarily have kind of one shape. So if I draw it with that brush I was using before, and I change the color to green, I can drag it on, and it'll change most of it to green, but you might have to do it twice. And so the same thing works with pencil. So if you're using like a pencil and it's a little like gritty, you can usually just drop on a color and it'll change the whole thing.
So fancy. I had no idea you could do that.
Yeah. The other thing you can do with color is if you see, say I use this yellow and I said, oh, I really want to use that yellow again, but I already changed my dropper to green and I don't really feel like finding that same exact yellow, is you can go over to the same panel that we changed the size and opacity and the undo and redo, and you'll see this little button in the middle. If you click that button, you're going to get a colored eyedropper. It kind of pops up anywhere on the screen. If you drag that around, you can see on the bottom here is the color that I have chosen, and the top color is whatever color I'm hovering over. So if I hover over this yellow, it's going to pick up that yellow, and when I let go, that's the new color that I'm painting with. So one other panel we're not really going to talk about, but feel free to really check out by yourself, is this magic wand up here. So if you click this magic wand, there's a whole bunch of different adjustments you can make. You might recognize some of the things like opacity or blur or sharpen, and you might see some that you have never heard of that term. When this is over, feel free to check out those. The best way to find out what they do is just click them and click around and see what happens. Some of them have sliders that might come up. You can kind of change the sliders. Like if I do hue and saturation, I can change the saturation and it's going to apply to the whole layer. But the best thing to do is if you see something you don't know what it does, just click it and see what it does, and then you'll find out. But you can do some kind of funky stuff with it later if you want to get creative. So another tool that you use, that I use a lot in Procreate as a designer, and maybe if you're trying to make something that's not necessarily a like piece of art, is the grid tool. So anytime you're going to do anything that's going to have perfect lines, you'd maybe want to use a grid. So how you do that is you go into settings and go to the canvas button, the one that's second from the left. On the canvas, you're going to see drawing guide. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. And you'll see a grid will pop up on your screen. This might be the perfect grid for you. This is a little too big for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Edit Drawing Guide underneath Drawing Guide. This is going to give me a bunch of options. So the only one that I really mess with is grid size. So if you see grid size on the slider here, I'm actually going to drag that down so it's a little closer and more like grid paper for me. You can also see, I'm going to use 2D grid, but you can see if you click isometric grid or perspective, different things come up. So if you're going to draw with perspective, you could use an isometric grid. And that'll help guide you if you don't, if you're not comfortable doing it freehand. So I'm going to go back to my 2D grid. It's a size that I like. If you wanted to, you could change the color of the grid up here. So if you were drawing with lines that were already turquoise and you said, okay, I want to make the grid purple to stand out, you can go ahead and change that up here on that slider. You can also change the opacity, how faint or heavy it is, and the thickness. I'm fine with mine the way it is. There's also something you can do if you are like, okay, I have my grid, but I still absolutely cannot draw a straight line. You can click this button down here called Assisted Drawing. If you click Assisted Drawing, what's going to happen is when we hit Done, oh, I changed my grid to white. I changed it. Hit Done, and now try drawing a line. you'll notice that every line you draw is going to be perfectly straight. So say I wanted to do like hash shading, I could do it like this and it would be exactly straight lines. When you click your layers, if you're noticing that you can only draw with assisted or everything's turning out straight, double check your layers and maybe one is assisted. So if you go to your layers panel, it'll say if it's assisted or not. And to turn that off, you can click it and you'll get a bunch of options. And drawing assist, you can see has a check mark, and I'm gonna uncheck that. And then when I go back, I'll be able to draw whatever lines I want. So once you've drawn some straight lines and turned it off, I want you to clear that layer. And we're going to talk about another way to draw straight lines. So choose whatever color you want. I'm going to choose a blue. And as a pen that you feel comfortable with, let's try doing like a more practical pen. So I'm going to go to inking, and I'm going to choose technical pen. I'll scroll down a little bit to get there, because that's the one that I like to use. So that's in the inking category if you want to use that one, but you might have to scroll down a little bit to get there. So once you've got a good pen, what I want you to do is watch me first and then try it. So you're gonna draw a line. So I'm drawing a line, I'm drawing a line, I'm drawing a line. My pen is still on the page, my pen's still on the page, and I'm gonna stop, but my pen stays on the page. It's gonna snap to a perfect line, and when I pull it up, the line will be perfect. So try drawing some straight lines. So even if I make it really wonky, but I keep my pen on the page and I hold it down, it'll snap to a perfect line. And then if as I keep my pen on the page, I can move it around and choose how short I want it to be, how long I want it to be. But the minute my pen goes off the page, that's the line and I can't move it anymore. So try drawing some lines while I plug in my computer.
Hey Liz, can you tell us, you said your pen is not moving. Tell us what exactly you're doing. Say it again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, gotcha now.
I'm drawing the line, but when she moved her pen up, the line went up at a diagonal. Mine is not doing that. What,
so when
I
you
don't
draw,
know what she did.
Okay, so when you draw the line, keep your pen depressed on the page. Don't pick up your pen, and then just move your pen, still depressed on the page.
All right, I guess I wasn't pushing hard enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so try drawing different lines, maybe different sizes.
Did it work when you did that?
It worked once. Tricky.
Yeah, you really have to make sure that it's still pressed on the page, or else you're not going to be able to move it. If you accidentally pick it up, if you haven't drawn anything else yet, you'll get an option at the top that says Edit Shape.
Mm-hmm.
And you can click that, and then you can move around the points, just like we saw on our Move tool. There's still those blue circles, and you can actually drag those. But again, the minute that I start drawing something else, that goes away, or I click off of it, that goes away, and I can't redo that. I have to actually draw the line over again. So you can see this might be a cool tool if you wanted to draw a rectangle or a square. There's actually another way to draw a rectangle or square. So go ahead and clear off the lines that you've drawn by swiping left and clicking clear. And I want you to try and draw a rectangle. It does not have to be a good rectangle, but try and do it on your grid if you can. And again, hold down the button and it's going to say quadrilateral created. You can see the angles are totally wonky on mine, but watch me first and then try it yourself. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, close it up, and it's going to say quadrilateral created. Now I'm going to click edit shape like I did with the line, and there's going to be a couple options. Right now it says quadrilateral, but I want it to have 90-degree angle, so I'm going to click rectangle. That's going to make my angles 90 degrees. This is one of those things that if you have a grid and you're drawing exactly on the grid lines, it's going to make it a lot easier because you can see it doesn't snap to a perfect, perfectly aligned to the grid. So if you can try and get it as close to the grid marks, if I try again and I really make sure my points are exactly on the corners, it's going to look a lot nicer. Actually, it recognizes a rectangle, but if you wanted it to just be a quadrilateral, you could actually move these around. At the minute I click rectangle, it's going to snap back to be 90 degrees. And to get off of that menu, you're just going to click anywhere on the screen. So try drawing some different rectangles. If you make it look more like a square, it will actually give you the option when you click edit shape to be a square, and it'll make sure all the lines are the exact same size. But if you draw a very wonky rectangle, it's not going to recognize it as a square. So you got to be, you know, it takes a mix of kind of trickery and skill to make sure that you're, it recognizes what you're doing. So once you have your squares, try drawing like 4 or 5 squares and then pause for a minute. Okay, so once you've got a few squares, we're gonna try, so I've got this one rectangle that's kind of wonky. You can see it's a perfect rectangle, but it's not on the lines. It's kind of tilted, so I really wanna make that straight. But if I click my transform and my move tool, you can see it selects the whole area. And if I rotate it here, so I rotate it here, the whole thing is gonna rotate, and I don't wanna do that. So I'm gonna hit undo. And now we're gonna try this tool called the selection tool. This tool is up here. It looks like a little S. And if you click it, we're gonna get some options. Freehand, automatic, rectangle, or ellipse. I'm gonna click rectangle. So now if you click and drag anywhere on the screen, you'll see it's gonna make a little pathway of marching ants, and anything that's inside of that is what it's selecting. So I'm going to let go of it when it's around the rectangle, and you'll see that the only thing in white is the rectangle. That's the only thing it's selected. If I wanted to select 2 things, I could make another rectangle, but I'm not going to do that because I just want this one. Once I have that selected, now actually I can go ahead and click my move tool again, and you'll see the box is now around my rectangle and not around all the different rectangles. And I can make sure my magnetics is off because I don't want it to snap to 15 degrees. And I can use that green circle again to rotate just that one. So if you mess up on just one, don't worry. There's a way to just select one. And when I'm done with it, I'm gonna hit my move tool again. You'll see the selection turns off blue. and the move tool turns off blue, and that means that I'm back to my whole screen. If you select something, try doing freehand select and drawing like you would with your brush, and anything in, when you connect them, you have to click that gray circle again to connect them. You'll see that anything that I drew around is now selected. So if I use my move tool, you can see it's taking part of that because that was in the selection that I chose. I hit undo to get it back to normal. Another cool thing with selection is if I select, say, a little circle off to the side, and I click the gray to make it one, to make it complete. If I paint something, so if I go to my paintbrush tool, it's only going to show up in the selection. So basically what the selection tool is, it says ignore anything that's covered in these gray diagonals here. Only pay attention to the stuff that's selected. And to get rid of the selection again, we go back and we click the S. So you probably won't be surprised to hear that you actually can do Procreate shapes with some other shapes too. So you can try drawing a perfect circle, holding it down, it'll snap. Click edit shape and you can change it from an ellipse to a circle. So try drawing some different shapes. You can do circles. You can try a triangle. You can even try a curve. And this one you can kind of move around the points a little bit. And the cool thing at Procreate is, say I want to draw 3/4 of a circle, I could actually do that. It'll snap and then I can edit shape circle, and now it's 3/4 of a circle. So you don't have to necessarily close the endpoints. It can kind of just figure out for you what you want to do. So just practice, take a minute, practice drawing some shapes. Okay, so once you've drawn some shapes, go ahead and clear your layer. And we're gonna do a small project together. So we're gonna create an invitation using all the skills that we know. So I'm gonna use my fingers to rotate my canvas so it's upright because I want my invitation to be this way. If you want yours to be landscape, that's totally fine. And what it's gonna eventually look like this. So this is gonna look something like this. So maybe you wanna use it as something you print out. Maybe it's something you wanna use on social media. If you want to maybe make a Facebook event, this is kind of a way that you can do it. So we're going to start out making the background. So we're going to really fill up the whole space with the background, and don't worry about leaving space for the text because we're going to make a box on top of it, and you won't have to worry about it overlapping anything. And then I'm going to teach you how to put some type onto your project. So I'm going to go back to the document that I was on before, and I'm going to turn off my grid. So to turn off the grid, remember we go to Settings, Canvas. You might already be in Canvas here, and then click Drawing Guide off. So now it's kind of just a time for you to try out a different brush. Oh, actually, you know what? Here's one thing I forgot to do. I forgot to mention, if you want to change your background of the color on your canvas, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to your layers panel, and there's something that says background color. You may have already touched this or played with this. If you click it, you're gonna get a color wheel just like you had before. You can choose any color that you want for your background, and it's gonna change the whole background. So I'm gonna choose this yellow that I saved before because I like that color. And now I want you to just take whatever brushes you want, and I want you to draw a background. So really fill up the whole page. I'm gonna draw some flowers or some stars. That's what I'll do, I'll draw some stars. But use whatever brushes you want, make it look nice, however you want it to look, but just try and fill up the whole page. And I'm gonna use my fill to fill in the star. So using tips that we've learned before and tricks. And this is going to be the background for your thing. If you want it to look really artistic and you just want to use a watercolor brush and make different patterns and shapes, go ahead and do that. But really make sure that your page is covered. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to just go ahead and make something that you like. Also, if you're trying to fill something in, you notice that it's filling in the background, you probably haven't closed your shape. So just double check and make sure that your lines are closed before you try and fill it in. And don't be afraid to go off the edge. Things can look kind of cool when they're falling off the side. Don't be afraid to play with different brushes and different colors. Really make it whatever you want it to look like. It's kind of a time to just be creative and play. It doesn't have to look perfect.
Hey, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going to show them the streamline feature on the brushes?
Oh, yeah, that's a little more advanced, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so once you've got something drawn on the background that you like, I'm gonna go ahead and recommend that we turn the grid back on. So go to Settings, Canvas, Drawing Guide, back on. I'm gonna change mine back to teal because that's the color that I usually have it as. Okay, so now we're gonna do our square that the text is gonna go on top of. So choose a color that you want. I'm actually gonna do a lighter shade of the color that I have. So I'm gonna use my eyedropper. Remember the eyedropper's over here. To choose that yellow, and then I'm gonna go into my color and just choose something a little lighter. I think something like that. And actually maybe I'll make it a little green. Okay. So as you got a color you like, change to a brush. Let's change back to that same technical pen we were using before. So go to inking and technical pen. It might be already selected if you're using it before, but if not, scroll down and get that one. And you're gonna make a square or a rectangle or whatever shape you want. It's actually gonna be pretty easy because we're gonna be able to adjust it. So before you do the square, we're actually gonna do it on a new layer. This is kind of how we use layers. So I'm gonna add a new layer and I'm gonna start drawing on the new layer because if I wanna move the square and change the square, I can do it without messing up my background. So I'm gonna make a rectangle. It doesn't need to be the most beautiful rectangle, but try and get it on those grid lines. And hold it down, edit shape, rectangle. So that looks pretty good to me. Once you've got your rectangle, you can see this is not the size it's gonna eventually be. This would be way too small. But once you've got your rectangle, use your color bucket by dragging the circle and dropping it inside the square. If it fills up the background, that means that your square is not totally closed. So now, if you want to change the size of the square, you guessed it, we can use the Move and Transform tool. So go ahead and click on your Move and Transform tool. And if you've got it on a different layer, you can see it'll only come up with that square. And I'm gonna turn on Freeform so that I can move it whatever way I want. And I'm gonna make it longer and maybe a little wider. And then move it so it feels like it's in the middle. And you can do this anywhere. You can also use your fingers to pinch it. And if you don't like it, if you accidentally made it really wonky, you can click reset at the bottom and it'll snap back to the way it was before. You can start over with your transformation. Okay, so now all we need to do is add text. So when you've got it in a circle, basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna click your settings tool again, where you found the drawing guide, and to the left of drawing guide, you're gonna hit add. And in there, you'll see, this is where if you wanted to, you could add a photo if you wanted to trace something. You could add, you take the photo if you want. And you can add text here. So click add text and you'll see a thing comes up with text. It's gonna be in the color that you used recently. So while it's selected, go ahead and click the color and make it something that you can easily see. I'm gonna make mine black. And you're gonna type in whatever you want. I'm gonna type in "you're invited." After I type in "your," just like if I were using Word, I have to make an enter so I can, so I can type in the word below it. Now I give it an exclamation point. When you're done typing, you're actually gonna click Edit Style on the keyboard. And if you wanna go back to the keyboard, you just click the little keyboard button on the left. That's how you swap between the two of these. Here's where you kind of get to have fun. You can move the type around while you're working with it if you need to. This is where you get to kind of play around with different fonts and settings that you like. So you can use different settings. Actually, if you're a designer and you really want to get creative, you can actually import typefaces into ProCreate if you have the file. So go ahead, choose a font that you like. I'm going to choose Futura because I'm a designer. And if you want to change settings, you can kind of play around with this stuff. Obviously, size will make it bigger or smaller. Kerning will make the letters closer or further away from each other. And if you want to change how these look a little far apart vertically, so I'm actually going to change leading over here. So it's going to make it a little closer together. If you wanted to make them all caps, you could click this button over here. If you click all caps, then turn it back off, all of your capital letters you had before will go back to lowercase, so I'm not going to do that. And if you wanted to make the text left aligned, centered, or right aligned, you can click those buttons over here under attributes and you can see how it changes the way that it's set up. I'm going to keep mine centered because that looks pretty good for the top of the invitation. And you can see you can do different styles here. I like this italic, so I'm going to do that. And when you're done with how you want your type to look, click done. And then again, you can see on your layers panel that when you add text, it automatically puts it in a new layer by itself. If you want to edit the text, click that layer again and click edit text. You'll see when you click edit text, it automatically comes up to this design style. So if you want to go back to the keyboard, you can click the keyboard button and edit style if you want to go back to the style. It's going to automatically go to whichever one you were on last. So because this is on its own layer, you can move it by itself using the move and transform tool. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to move it down here. And now I want to add more text. So what I'm going to do is go back to my settings, make sure I'm on add, and click add text again. You'll see it automatically goes right back to the style. So I need to click the keyboard button to go back so I can put in type. So I'm going to say, Ashley's birthday party. And you can see if you wanted to put in if you wanted to see if you wanted to put in details, this is kind of how you do it. You can see mine is crazy because it's on top of each other, but I'm going to move it in a minute. You can also change this slider on the left and the right to make it thinner or wider, and when you change the size, it'll change how far away. So I'm gonna make mine, maybe I'll use a different font for this. Something that looks good to me. So when I'm done, I'm gonna hit done, and then I'm gonna use my move tool again to move it down here. And you can see this is kind of how you would add details, like with my other one, I added a date and time. If you are on the layer and you click it, it'll automatically go back into your settings, so you can change more things. So say I said, okay, actually, I don't want this to be black anymore. I can click my black and then change it to a color that I like better. I'm gonna go with blue. Feel free to turn on and off the grid, the drawing guide in Canvas drawing guide, so you can kind of see what it looks like. And the last thing that I'm going to show you before we wrap up is how to kind of really spruce up an invitation or something that you're doing. So if you have text on it, I'm going to move mine down a little bit because I don't have a lot of stuff on it. Try making a new layer, choosing a brush you like. I'm going to use black on, or maybe a navy blue on this one. And I'm going to stick with my technical pen. You can actually doodle on top of this stuff. So I made a new layer, and I'm going to just make this look really cute. I like to rotate mine so it's a little easier to draw. And maybe draw some arrows. But you can see just the difference of having this, which looks pretty straightforward and not super exciting, and adding a little bit of pizzazz to it can make a big difference. And that's something that Procreate is really, really awesome for. because you can really make it however you want it. Maybe I'll do some star outlines so it looks like the background. Maybe I'll do a little underline.
Hey guys, I'm going to jump in for just a second, Katie. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
I know
no.
we're at 1 o'clock already. We do have a few more things to cover. So if you would like to stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to keep going. But if you do need to jump off, just a reminder that we will send the entire video out to you when this is done. So once again, we're going to keep going. But if you need to jump off, feel free to do that. But this one is going to run a little bit longer than typically. I forgot to tell you that at the beginning. I apologize. But feel free to hang tight if you can. If not, we'll send you the link to watch the whole thing. Okay, we're going to keep going. Sorry, Katie.
Okay, so that's basically how you do an invitation. So you can see it's kind of cool. If I wanted to actually change my background or my color of this yellow box, remember I can go in, choose that layer, and then color drop a new color, make it, let's say I want to make it really light blue. I can go in and I can drop that in there. So really, you kind of feel free to make it whatever you want it to be. So I'm gonna give you another minute to play around in that, and then we're gonna do one more small project, which includes bringing in a photo and tracing it and seeing what that's like. That's something I do a lot in the work that I do. Is I am not a very talented visual artist by nature sometimes, so I have to do a lot of tracing to get things to look realistic. I don't really do realistic art, if you can't tell by my stars. So go ahead and finish up your invitation, add some doodles to it, whatever you like, and then in about 1 minute, I'm going to talk you through the next project that we're going to do, which is going to take about 10 minutes. Okay, so now I want you to go back to your gallery. So you're gonna click gallery. This is kind of your home page on the left. So you don't get rid of that beautiful invitation. And what I want you to do is click the plus button here. We're gonna create a new document. Again, we're gonna do screen size. And this time we're gonna bring in an image. So the first step to that is actually finding an image that we're gonna bring in. I'm gonna do basketball. So I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in basketball and go to Google Images. And I'm going to look for basketball that I like. And I'm going to choose this one here because it doesn't have any logo and I think that one looks kind of cool. It's a cool angle. And that looks like a basketball that I want to draw. So I'm going to go ahead and save it to my photos. If you don't know how to do that, you can hold down the picture and click add to photos. Once you've got your basketball or whatever picture you want in your saved photos, I want you to go back to Procreate. Okay, once you're back in Procreate, you're gonna go to your settings again and add, just like when we added text, but now you're gonna click Insert a Photo. So click Insert a Photo, and I'm gonna choose that image of a basketball. And you'll see it comes up with the dancing ants around it, or the marching ants around it, so you can see that if you were to drag one of these corners, it's gonna make it bigger. So I'm gonna make it just big enough that I guess that's a good size. So you'll make it a little smaller. So I wanna make sure everyone's ready to sketch. So I'm gonna give you one more minute to just make sure your picture is on your board. So once you've got it on there, go to your layers, and you're gonna click this little N on the layers. This N actually means normal, for normal blending mode. This is kind of some more advanced stuff, but I encourage you later, if you're playing with different layers and you have different colors and stuff on different layers, try just playing around with a couple of these different blending modes and seeing what they do. It could have some pretty cool results. But for now, the thing that we want to do is we actually want to make this layer not as bright, because we're going to sketch over it. And if it's super bright, it's going to be really hard to see our pencil. So where it says max here, I want you to drag that down to, let's do 25%. Doesn't have to be exactly 25. And then I want to make a new layer, because if I draw, I don't want to accidentally do it on top of this layer. My new layer is automatically going to be 100% opacity. That's good. So once you've got a new layer, go to your brushes, click sketching, and choose a pencil that you want to draw with. I like technical pencil, so I'm going to stick with that one, but whatever looks good to you. And I want you to change your color down to black. If you see, you can kind of see how this pencil is going to work. But what we're going to do is we're going to sketch over the basketball. So you can see when I draw my line, you can see it over the basketball because we knocked down the opacity. But I want this to be a perfect circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and trace the circle as best as I can. And as soon as I'm done, I'm going to make sure the ends meet, and I'm going to hold it down and do that quick shape tool again. So I'm going to try and draw the circle as best as I can, tracing, but you can see I'm kind of messing up along the edges. But I'm going to hold it down. It'll say ellipse created. I'm going to edit shape and click circle. And I can actually move it around to make sure it's exactly on top. Once you've got your circle, you can go ahead and sketch the other lines. Maybe you like to sketch a little bit more like that. Maybe you're good with going in kind of one line. I like to do kind of a combination for a sketch. I think it's a little easier to do it in shorter lines. Okay, so once you have your sketch, you can go ahead and hide the basketball layer. Whoops, I hit the wrong one. And you can see you'll be left with your sketch, which probably looks pretty good and pretty similar to a basketball. Didn't know you could draw a basketball, right? Now you can. So the next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna add a new layer on top of layer 2. If you selected the basketball layer and you click a new layer, it's gonna go on top of layer 1. Just drag it up to the top. If you're already selecting layer 2, it'll just go right on top. And I want you to choose a new pen. So I'm gonna go back to my technical pen because I like that one. So click back to inking and choose technical pen. You might already be on it. And yep, that looks like a good thickness to me. And you're basically gonna do the same thing. You're gonna trace over the sketch that you've made. So I'm gonna do the circle the same exact way that I did before. I'm gonna trace the circle and then hold down to make sure I get that perfect circle. Edit shape, circle. And if you want to make it look really nice, you can see there's kind of a little wider here, and you can kind of even just fix that up with your pen so that that goes away. Now I'm going to do, actually for this one, I want to be able to fill in the circle. Yeah, so actually what I'm going to do, this seems a little counterintuitive, but I'm going to show you why it works in a minute. So go ahead and make a new layer after you do your circle. And from that new layer, that's where you're going to draw these black lines. And remember, you can draw perfect arcs. So if you draw a line like this, you can actually hold it down and it should be able to change to a perfect arc. I'm going to use my eraser tool to get rid of a little bit of this overlap. And then for these kind of funkier shaped lines, you just got to try and do your best. I'm trying to do it one more time. What I found is sometimes the lines can look a little shakier if you do them really slowly. So if you can try and do it in kind of one nice swoop, it might look a little straighter, but it's kind of up to you. So once you've got that, you're going to have your lines on a different layer than your circle. And I'm going to turn off my sketch layer, so I only have those 2 layers. And the reason why I wanted to have these in 2 different layers is because I'm actually going to fill in this circle. So what I'm going to do is click my circle layer. I'm going to choose a color that I want my basketball to be. This one's going to be pink. And I'm going to drag it over and it's going to fill the whole thing. So feel free to make it whatever color you want. And actually now I've decided that I want these 2 layers to be the same layer. I don't like it on these 2 different layers. So what I want to do is I'm going to double click or click this layer forward to the blue and then click it again. And I'm going to click merge down. You can notice that when I click merge down, the 2 layers become 1 layer. Now I won't be able to edit them or move them separately, but they're going to be in the same place. And the one last thing that I want to do before this basketball is perfect is I want to add some kind of cool effect to it. So I'm going to add a new layer, but I'm actually going to put it underneath layer 3 because I want it to be underneath the basketball. So I'm going to go down to black so I can make another outline. And I'm actually going to draw some flames. And the cool thing about this is my flames, maybe I'll start on top of the layer, but you can see my flames are going to go on top of the basketball. And I'm going to actually close up that layer so that I can fill it in if I want to later. And I'm going to move the basketball on top of the flames, and you can see that it just goes away. Or it goes, the overlapping part is underneath so you can't see it. And actually I'm going to do I'm gonna do another little flame, and now I want to fill those in. So I'll turn my basketball back on, and I'm gonna fill one of those in orange. And remember, I'm on my flame layer, so if I drag it and it's closed, it should just fill right in. And then I'm gonna do the underneath one, I'm gonna do it yellow. Whoops. Dragged it to the black. And if I want to move those flames, I can actually do that. And then again, I think that everything looks more exciting if you doodle on it. So I'm gonna add a new layer and just add some kind of action marks. And that's it. That's how you trace the picture and then kind of make it your own. Because there's one thing about drawing a perfect basketball, and there's a whole nother thing about making something that's kind of your own special art. Because I look at that picture of the basketball that I had before, and this looks nothing like it. So this is kind of one of those ones that I don't feel like it's, you know, because some people think, oh, it's sketching or it's tracing, it's cheating, but like this looks nothing like it did before. It's totally fine. So I don't know, Professor Carr, if there were any questions that people had, but that's kind of all I have.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. We're getting lots of feedback on the chat saying how much everyone liked it and thanking you. So thanks everybody for joining. I hope y'all, you know, some of you may not have had an iPad, but at least hopefully you got a sense of what you can do with ProCreate. And really appreciate, Katie, you joining us and teaching everyone. This is actually the last of our Lagniappe series. So thank you guys for, if this is your first or you've joined on a lot of them, thanks for coming. And that is all we have today.